Good morning, Kest.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm awkward. It's what I do best. So I am currently drawing out masks. If the friendly viewers have any votes on whether you'd prefer something more birdish or something mammalish, I have one of each of those drawn. Otherwise, I'm just going to start things at random. My cameraman just walked off.
Yeah, no, we can see just fine. This looks great.
Okay,
We can
okay.
see you're drawn on
So
there.
basically, for fitting the masks, because the masks that I make are wearable and intended to be comfortable. That's the key bit there. And so the points that matter that I do not move, you'll see here on this, the purplish lines are what I got from my pattern, and the black line is what I'm drawing directly on here. There's 5 points that don't get moved. This one, that's going to be the forehead, center of the eye, and then these are actually going to be the sides of your nose when it folds in. And those, I have different sets of those 5, but I don't change them on the copper because those have to be fit, and that's got to be done in paper beforehand. Anything else I can change on the copper. So I can make the nose longer, I can make the nose shorter, I can take out this top, I can bring down this bottom, I can make the eyes bigger. I don't make them smaller, but and basically anything else can change, but those 5 points are set. This one is going to have a nose that sticks pretty far out, which is why these two are so far apart. But they have to line up correctly with the middle of the eyes. And so if I'm going to be moving them, they have to get moved beforehand. Casual changes.
So it's I don't think we're picking up the purple pin that you said you have on there. All we can see is the black. But so you're starting off with a paper template every time.
There. That's yeah.
And getting those those same marks that'll be.
Yeah. So I'm getting that mark can't change. That one can't change. That one can't change. And then the 2 centers of the eyes.
Okay, but from there, then you kind of adjust to whatever that mask is going to be.
Right. So on this one, those 5 points would be at very different places. It would be those 2 still centers of the eyes, but that mark would be down here. So it's a whole half an inch in. And this nose goes much closer to the bridge of the actual person's nose, whereas this one is going to stick kind of straight out. And if I want it to actually go up, they actually get even farther apart. And then on some of them, I'll actually pull it the whole way up. And that means that I can kind of double up in here to give it tusks or feelers if it's a beetle or something like that. Because this doesn't have room to double that nose. That nose is single. But if I want the nose doubled for any reason, then those points are actually going to pull even farther around, and the eyes will pull with them. And it's just easier to have the paper pattern as notes. I mean, I know what this one looks like, so I can start from there. And then this one is going to be a sort of hero punch kind of clown kind of fellow. 1 second here. The other one that's drawn out is based on this, which you can see is a newer pattern because it's not even in it's in newsprint. But this one has more of a mammally nose and nice big ears that curl around, but less fold forming. So, and those are like the only 2 that are actually drawn here. I meant to get more done than I did.
So one of the questions we've already got here is if we missed the shot of the final product on here, but I'm just assuming that you don't actually have a final product here. You're kind of going as you're sort of making it as you go, right?
Yeah, they are all one of a kind. Mm-hmm. So if I'm making it right now, I definitely don't have a finished one ready to go.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. I do 1 second.
And so Charlie is also asking, if we can get copies of these patterns to play with. And I would just say, Charlie, I think that you should probably grab a piece of paper, anyone, and make your own patterns. These things aren't necessarily proprietary, but I think that making your own pattern is probably the best way to go.
If you are making your own pattern, make sure the eyes are big enough. That's a really common mistake. You need them to, they don't fit around the eye. You want it to fit around the ocular ridge, because if it's catching the eyelid, it's not comfortable. So make sure that that eye is big enough. As for a finished product, the mammally nose is going to look sort of like this. This one's a little bit wider, but something like that.
Mhm.
And the Pierrot nose will look something like that. The ones with the big horns like this just take too long for demos. We can't do it.
Yeah. What kind of weight and gauge copper are you using for these masks usually?
I use 0.040, which is going to be right around 18 gauge. Even if you're using steel, it still has to be around that. It's not for the strength, it's for the thickness, because if it's any thinner than that, you have a knife edge. But nobody wants that on their face. And the 0.040 is a good balance. It's still going to be pretty flexible. So like, again, with this finished one, you can see it's got that spring to it. So it'll fit on somebody's face and they can adjust as they need to. In steel, it's harder to adjust on site, but you still have to do about that same thickness or it's just not very comfortable, unless you're going to be like folding the edges or something like that. But yeah, it's 0.040. And I buy big sheets, 2 feet by 3 feet, and I generally lay out the whole sheet at a time before I start cutting it, which is what I was trying to do, but I failed. So we're just gonna cut out this little bit here. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll stop asking questions for a minute to let you get after it.
Well, yeah. So if no one has any druthers, I'm just going to do this one on the corner because it's easier to get at.
Yep, please do.
Okay, cool. We will be moving to the Beverly shear.
And so while you're cutting out, if you can multitask, I mean, I would just kind of keep a conversation going with you.
Absolutely.
Where do you source your copper from in Massachusetts?
So in Massachusetts, we have this fantastic place called Admiral Metals that does big stuff for big companies. But an amount of time ago, they opened a side door that you have to know about. And if you go to that side door, they let you in and you can buy offcuts. It's outside Boston. Oh, shoot, I can't remember which town it's actually in. It might be in Waltham. That said, this sheet, because I was in Maryland and that was not available to me when I purchased this, is actually from onlinemetals.com, which is available to everyone everywhere. Onlinemetals.com is not the cheapest place to get everything, but it is reasonably affordable and they deliver to your door.
Yeah, I've had the same experience with them. They're not always the cheapest, but they've got a lot of it.
It's just so convenient.
Yeah, and if you're in the Northwest, for us folks here, I use Alaskan copper in brass. They have a store in Portland and I think another one in Seattle. And again, you know, they deal with like big orders for ships and things. And they kind of scoff at you if you're just getting a little piece or two, but sometimes they let it through. And it looks like Dwayne's also saying Admiral Metals in Woodburn.
Oh, it's in Woodburn. Okay. Yes. Thanks, Dwayne. It's been a while since I actually went there. I went there when I lived in Boston. But from here, it's actually still pretty far. I don't know. We'll see. I cannot see what I'm doing. Let's approach from the other side. Oh, wait, that's what I'm doing. Okay. So I don't know if you can see this on the screen or not, but I forgot to level this table that the Beverly shear is attached to. So my lovely assistant is in fact holding down the other side of it valiantly.
Well,
we'll never mention this
again. The floor at some point, huh?
yeah. Well, yeah, shims are great. I just forgot to do that. You know, there's going to be a few things through this demo that I'll be like, oh, right.
Well, like you were telling me earlier, so you just moved shops into this new building, and this is actually the very first mask you're making in this new shop, right?
It is, which means that there will be at least one tool that I will go, oh no, I used that, and not know where it is.
Well, I think that even well worked in shops, we all have that problem. You can't find the tool you need.
Yeah. So with the Beverly shear, I get as close as I can, and I'm doing the long, straight-ish lines. It does pretty good curve. Does pretty good curves. I've got my foot on it now. Oh dear, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. But I'm not going to try to get into any of the small places because I was not very good at that. But here we go. So that's about, well, actually, I can do this one too.
So I would say anybody in the audience, if you don't have a Beverly shear and you ever work with thin gauge copper and some thin gauge steels, that tool is just awesome.
Yeah, I love my Beverly shear. And they are relatively expensive, but there's nothing between the cheap Harbor Freight one that is not very good and the Beverly, and it's worth investing in. You do have to have a table that's sturdy to attach it to.
Well, in all honesty, you know, I still have the cheap Beverly shear one, and it is not the greatest tool, but it gets
still, yeah.
You know, I sure wish I had a real Beverly someday.
And the thing with the Harbor Freight ones is that if you get a good one of the Harbor Freight ones, it's okay. It's sort of like getting cheap guitars. Like occasionally when you get a cheap guitar, you get a good one. So, you know, if you're willing to risk it, there's a good chance you'll get a decent one. And this actually was was part of my severance from my old fabrication job, so I didn't pay for it.
Oh,
we are moving over to the jewel. Yeah, that I had right out of college. I got a fabrication job, and when I left, I think over here will be good. When I left, the guys decided that any tool that they had purchased since I had been there, and I'd been there for like 5 years, they obviously didn't use without me, so I could just take. So next step is the jeweler's saw, which looks very much like a coping saw, but has a teeny tiny blade. However, I actually use relatively big blades in it. This is a giant blade. You can't see it. It's giant because I'm doing large work. I actually size a little bit higher than I should for the thickness of the metal because the piece, you'll note, is deeper than that. I do also have a deeper throat saw. It is good to have variety, and sometimes I need it, but I hate that thing. So I only use it if I have to. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Bench pan has a little angle cut out so that everything is fully supported, and you're basically clamping with your hand. Properly speaking, you're never supposed to be cutting along a Sharpie line because the saw blade is so much thinner than a Sharpie line is. But in fact, I'm just fixing my drawing as I go. So I follow the Sharpie line. There's a lot of things that I don't do right. A lot of these, because the saw isn't as deep as the mask, is angle of approach and figuring out where you're coming from. You'll note that there are, in fact, 2 lines here. I'm deciding which one to follow as I go think I'm gonna go with the lower one. There we go. As you can see, I am in fact fixing my curves as I go because I'm better with a saw than I am at drawing. So that's all the exterior cuts. Next is the eyes. So the saw blade is a number 1. I think it's Hercules. Drill bit is going to be, I believe, a number 57, but it might be a 55. They are about corresponding to each other.
Kest, before you start drilling those holes, we did have a question. Yep. I think I answered in the chat. So I just want to make sure that it's. So why do you choose a jewelry saw to make some of those cuts versus like tin snips or shears of some braid?
Tin chips and shears both make not the level of cut that I am looking for at all. You can use them for straight lines, but on the 18 gauge, they're not even gonna be neat for straight lines. So it's like the part that I was doing with the Beverly shear, you could do with tin snips. But the detail work, if you tried to do that with tin snips, you would not be producing the thing that I am producing. So jeweler's saw is made for this exact thing, and it's made for thin sheet metal in detail work, particularly things like that mouse that you were showing earlier in the slideshow, if people were here for that, that level of precision. With a jeweler's saw, it is more precise than a Sharpie marker. A tin snip is not.
And then we saw you were like lubricating your blade, and that's.
Yeah, you can use almost anything. This is Burr Life, and it's convenient on the bench. It is also true that I frequently use this big block of very dirty beeswax. Anything that you use for drills or saws or anything will work. I generally stay away from the liquid oils because they tend to erase the Sharpie lines. Whereas the more solid ones stay where they are, so you don't have to worry about them erasing the lines that you are currently cutting. But anything will work. I mean, it's the Burr Life. The Burr Life does a good job of not filling in the tiny teeth because, again, I keep showing you this saw, and I don't know if you can even see the teeth on that blade. They're really tiny. And so if you have something that's going to fill it in, then it doesn't work as well anymore. But honestly, I think they all work. The Burr Life is made for it, but yeah, I don't think it's going to focus on that. It's very small.
Well, I think we can tell that it's a very small blade.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, this one's actually giant for a jeweler's saw. So most of them come in sizes like 2-0 and 8-0. And this is a 1. It doesn't have a 0 after it. It's giant. But it works for the 18 gauge. It wouldn't work for anything thinner. It would catch. So I do have some thinner ones for like, because I do some smaller work, and when I do the smaller work, I use the smaller blade. So here, with the masks that don't have a long nose, I actually drill this point, and then I can go the whole way around without having to pull my saw. But the ones with the nose gets in the way, so I usually drill on the outside and just do it as 2 lines. So that's that. And this one's going to have 3 because I gave it a fancy eye because I apparently wanted you all to get real bored watching me saw. I don't know.
Well, it's all part of the process.
Yeah. That's not going to work. Here. And I just broke a drill bit. No, apparently they're number 60 drill bits. I was lying to y'all. So I broke the drill bit in there, so I'm not going to drill in the same spot. But I do need to get there. So we'll do. Nope, not far enough. There we go. So the other thing that jewelers saws are made for is passing through, so you can get your interior cuts done. Lots of saws are made for that, but it's basically, it is just a smaller version of a coping saw in woodworking. I can never get the thumb screws tight enough. That everybody else does this with their fingers. I'm the only person I know who does that. And cutting out my jeweler's saw blades are made to break before they get dull. And this one was already dull, which is part of why I use the bigger ones, because it gives me a little bit more time.
Well, and so I'm friends with a lot of jewelers, and those are so easy to break. Few that I've used are just like if you're not using them right, they're pretty fragile.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are supposed to break before they get dull. That said, sometimes, so I've been on this thing where I've been trying different brands, and I'm not gonna get into my saw blade review here because it just seems like an inappropriate place for it. But I have very firm feelings about certain brands. But some of them are made to be much easier to get around turns. And when they're easier to get around turns, so if you're doing like fancy filigree work, you'd need the ones that go around turns more easily, and those ones tend to break more easily as well.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about any of us getting bored. I think that everybody who's tuned into this one is just stoked to see metalwork.
Sweet. That's a new blade, so it has to get lubed. And look, see how much faster it goes now? Okay, let's do this. I knew that was going to happen. So copper is super forgiving, so you can do cold folds like that as long as they're not tight, and undo them again and it won't mind. Some of the other metals that I work with do mind, but this is one of them.
So we did have a question that I'm just going to answer. It was, why don't you use like a scroll saw or something? And for the process that Kest is doing right here, where they've like poked the hole through and then fed the blade.
And I would be done at this point, but I still have to go back and get that drill bit that got stuck. So I prefer a manual extraction. Come on. There you go. I actually do have a scroll saw in answer to the question that I sort of overheard. I use it if I need a really deep throat for something, but otherwise it actually takes longer. And because commercially available scroll saws, they do make fancy ones for these blades, but commercially available scroll saws only go up and down by about half an inch. So it only uses this much of the blade instead of this much of the blade, and you wear out your blades a lot faster. And it's also somehow it does not actually go any faster because the speed that I'm moving at is the speed that I can see at. So if I try to go any faster along this line, I'll miss my line. Other people have different skill sets than I do, so someone else might be able to do it, but I can't. And I broke another one. Usually I can reliably get through a mask with one blade.
Well, I think it's Murphy's Law that, as soon as you start to demo, everything goes wrong.
Yeah. That may have actually been close enough. Here we go. Still need to clean it up though. Okay. So that's the sawing. The next step generally is sanding, but I feel like y'all know how to sand. You probably don't necessarily want to watch that in a demo.
I think that if you were going to be doing some sanding, we could take maybe you don't need to do the whole thing, but we'd love to see kind of how you do some of the sanding.
Okay.
And so we had another question from folks that says, they're asking, this like jewelry saws are new to them. Getting blades is new. Where do you get your blades from? Where would you buy a jewelry saw? Like, do you have any recommendations on?
So there are a few people who make really nice jeweler's saws. Green Lion makes really nice jeweler's saws. One word, green lion, as in a lion that runs along and hunts zebras, but green. What I'm using here is a German saw blade. They're about $10, maybe 12. I use one with I'm actually going to show you a couple. This is the standard one, and it is a 4-inch throat. I usually use this one. It is a 5-inch throat. When I'm moving over there, I'm moving to a measuring thing, but I've got only go as deep as you need it to be. The narrower it is, the more control you keep. And when you're first learning to use one, more control matters a lot. I've been using it for a long time. It doesn't matter a whole lot anymore. But they come in depths from, I think, 3, 4, and 5. 4 is a good middle ground to learn on. This one came from Rio Grande, which is a jeweler's supply place. Any jeweler's supply place will work. They all have them. They're standard. If you are in the city, there will be somewhere there will be hidden a building that will be the jeweler's building that'll have a bunch of goldsmiths in it that do all of the engagement rings for everyone in your city. And it won't have a sign out front, but it exists. And in there is a supplier. And that supplier will sell you one of these for cheaper. But if you don't want to deal with that, Rio Grande, Stuller, Stuller has them. Contenti, Contenti has them.
Auto
The same
Fry
place,
as well.
Auto Fray. Yep, yep. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what I order from regularly, but any jeweler supply will have them, and they'll have the blades. The blades are a standard size; they fit in here. This one has this little thing here. When you're first learning, again, that's handy because what you can do is loosen that and knock it down and use a blade that you've already broken. And you'll break a bunch when you're first learning. The thing that is worth noting with a jeweler's blade is that it is incredibly sharp. And you don't put a lot of pressure on it. You really are just pulling down. You're never pushing forward. And just practice and you'll get good at it. Don't get frustrated at the beginning. It's one of those things that the first week is real rough, no matter how good you are at everything. The first week is going to be real rough.
Thank you for the saw tutorial. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and the size of the teeth, which again, I know we can't see here, but the size of the teeth, you want 2 per thickness of your metal, or else it'll get caught. Again, I can't even see that in person, but I know it exists. And so if you're using 18 gauge, a 2-knot is a good to start with. Again, I'm using a number 1 and it's okay. If you're doing any thinner, you want to go thinner. If you're going thicker, you can go a little bit thicker. A 1-knot is really about as big as you're going to end up using on sheet. When I'm doing steel 18 gauge, I use the 1-knot, even if I'm doing something small, because it gives it a little bit of extra strength. I do still use this on steel though. It works fine. It goes about the same speed. They break a little bit more often because they dull quicker. But otherwise it's fine. For sanding, I have a little thingy-mabob, and it takes little discs that just clip on, which is good because I'm going to use 3 or 4 of them on this thing. They are also from Rio. I think it's their store brand in this case. And they're just called sanding discs. They come with a paper backing or a plastic backing. I like the ones with the plastic backing. And this is a Fordham. It runs things. It's nice because you can get into really small holes with it, so you're going to see when I get to the other eye that it's not going to do everything. Also, I usually wear a dust mask for this, and I recommend wearing a dust mask for this. I just don't know where any of my dust masks are. I obviously wore one to get here because COVID has been great for dust masks, but then I put it down. And again, because this basically has to be finished like jewelry because it is being worn on the face and near the eyes, I do a lot of sanding. This is I think this is about 600 grit on there. And sometimes I'll even go down to finer if something's going to be close to the eye. And I think maybe we'll just sand the eyes for now and then do the forging. Yeah,
Let's
unless y'all want to keep watching that.
Well, and I would mention to anybody who's kind of, curious about these kind of entry jewelry tools, the flex shaft, and you've got a Fordham there, are
Yep.
super useful for all sorts of small work. And like I know that Anton Yakushev, who is this amazing sculptor out of steel, he uses those quite a bit with little cutoff discs and ball burrs, sculpt with, and there's no other tool that can really do what it does.
Yeah, it's very handy. They do, there's lots of levels of these. So Fordham itself makes lots of levels, and then there's other companies that make them. I would encourage anyone who's getting one to invest in getting a good handpiece because you're going to be holding that a whole lot. But all the parts are interchangeable. So even if you get a cheap one, you can use that handpiece on the good one later, and get a foot pedal you're willing to keep your feet on. But yeah, it's all those bits along there are all it. And now we shall move to actually hitting things in the near future. So I have this little forge and I do a lot of the masks in it because we're only doing one. It doesn't make sense for me to turn on the forge. I'm going to be using the torch. It is also true that the way that I get my colors, all those colors that we saw on all those things that went through on the slideshow, those deep purples, the reds, all come from quenching and boiling water. And the way that I get my water to boil, to quench in it, is I use it. So I'll do usually like 20 at a time, and I do the first run through, and then I do the second run through, and I actually keep all of the last runs for last. And by then the water is boiling. We only have one. We're not going to get those colors. So you don't get a demo of my colors.
No,
You'd have to be here all day.
one, having done some, fire patinas with copper, it's amazing the different levels of color you can get based off of the heat of the copper, the heat of the water, whether it's cold, whether it's hot. And it is a cool learning experience just to play with.
It's a lot of fun to play with, and even the humidity in the air will change it. It's once you get to the point that you know what colors you're going to get, then you know what colors you're going to get. And until then, it's a fun learning experience anyway, because all the colors are fun. We are going to, some of them are more archival than others. So we're actually going to fade through some of the less archival ones, and I will point those out when we get to them. Just because if you are playing with copper for the first time and you're playing with flame painting of copper for the first time, you don't want to sell something that changes color later. And so some of the light blues and greens at the very beginning generally fade within about 8 months. But the deeper colors, so if it's a deep color, it'll stay. You can also play with, and I probably will because I have to get something on this, and I'm not going to get my normal ones. You can also play with flux. This is not actually the flux that this label is marked. This is just borax. It's not even boric acid, it's just borax. And that's what I use because I have 2 little doves that live in the shop with me. And so it's important that we not produce fumes that will kill my friends. Speaking of which, I got to get this window open. I have not installed my fume hood yet, so don't judge me on that. No one's watching this. Judge me on the lack of fume hood. This is going to be quick. And I've got the windows open in the bird room, and I've got the windows here. So
Kest,
you're not allowed to give me trouble.
That you use the flux to help with getting different colors. Is that what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of the colors that you're getting when you're doing the flame work are how much oxygen gets to the piece, which is why the boiling water makes a bigger difference, because when you're quenching in boiling water, the water actually hits it faster, so you get less oxidation. Whereas if you're quenching in cold water, the piece itself boils the water that's right in contact with it, and it has to get that water up to temp before it actually gets quenched. So there's a couple of seconds longer to get quenched in cold water than hot water. The flux will also prevent oxygen from hitting it, so you can kind of paint designs on there. The more paint like your flux is, the better results you're going to get from that. Because this is just hardened borax with water sort of floating in it, I can only kind of do areas with it. I'm also not going to do that at the beginning. So this is my thingy, I think. Well, there.
And yep. having experimented with this myself, I have taken to adding rock salt in with my flux sometimes afterwards, because you get these crazy dotting effects wherever there's a piece of salt.
Yeah, it's basically, it's not unlike raku firing. So horsehair or salt or some vegetables that you didn't finish eating last night, but they have to be relatively dry. Don't put anything wet in. But anything that you use is going to have an effect. You can also, like, so these are soft fire bricks. It's the same stuff that's on the inside of the forge. You can build a little thing like so, and if you have part of it in your little house, that part will get less oxygen and more heat. So then that'll be a different color than this is. There's a lot of fun ways to play with it. And I definitely encourage anybody who has a torch to just get some copper from the hardware store and play around. Oh, I have to actually turn. Okay. I use it just plain old plumber's torch. It's just acetylene. I keep pliers in a drawer here because I consistently forget to grab them before I start. And it's important to know your weaknesses and learn to work with them. So annealing temp on copper is where those colors start to run. I'm not sure. So these are the colors that are not archival that people like to play with. And they are fun to play with, but they don't stay. But if you heat the whole way up to just about where it starts to glow, those colors are going to last pretty much forever. You'll note that I'm being careful to kind of stay away from these thin lines because those are going to heat a lot faster. Copper, the reason that people like copper pots is because copper runs heat. So you can't heat just one area. That's one of the things that's really nice about steel is that the area you heat is hot and the area you didn't heat is not hot. That is not true on copper. You have to heat the whole thing at the same time. And it will grab heat and transfer it. That's why it transfers electricity well. That's why we have electric wires made of copper. It's very generous. It likes to give away its heat. And so I'm not actually heating those thin areas at all. The other nice thing about copper, as opposed to brass, say, is that there is a long time between the annealing temp and the melting temp. So I can heat this the whole way up to glowing red, and that doesn't hurt the metal at all. In brass, it does. We're gonna quench. And you can see that we get these deep purples where I heated the whole way up to bright red. This is where it was still hot when I quenched it. So though it tends to flake off there, but it'll stay here. The back that isn't where I had the flame is a very different color. So that was sitting on these, and you can actually, that texture is from the plastic that I pulled off the back. It's not from anything that we just did. That's just, it shows up on the first heat. And whatever off gas happened from that plastic acts as a patina. I don't like to think about it. Now we're over here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is any texture that I want on the cheeks area, I'm actually going to do while it's still flat. So this hammer here is a traditional raising hammer that I have messed with. So this is for fold forming, but you'll note that I'm also using it for texture. I have all these hammers. I only use two. So it has a little bit more curve this way than a raising hammer would. A raising hammer would be kind of flat across the front. So it's only going to be hitting, so it distributes the pressure differently. And one side is narrower than the other. So I mostly use the narrower side. I do also have yet another one that's a little bit flatter that I use for some other things. Um, but mostly I end up just using this one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to hit all the way around the eyes, and that stretches the metal just a tiny bit. And then when we go to fit it, it will fit into the ocular ridge better. If you don't do that, it's fine, but it doesn't look as organic. It'll look much more robotic. So if I want to make a sort of like robot animal, I wouldn't do the step that I'm doing now. And so this pressure that basically, you saw that curve, the point of that curve is right on this line. So it's stretching more right at it and then fading off the edge. And this will also be a decorative element in the piece, so I am watching where it goes. Okay. There's going to be a lot of moving here. I would just back up. There's going to be a lot back and forth. So I'm wearing hearing protection. Can y'all hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, good. Cool. I wanted to make sure that I hadn't changed anything when I put on hearing protection. Uh, so what I was doing when I'm feeling along this edge here is you can feel when it's still annealed. And the difference is not something that I'm going to put into words, but if you take a piece of copper and you fold it in half like that, and just keep playing with it, you will eventually feel that difference. And it's worth ruining a couple of pieces to get familiar with it and see where it'll break. Copper is extraordinarily generous. It will go real far. So in brass, for instance, I probably wouldn't have been able to get that the whole way flat in one go. In silver, I definitely can't get that flat in one go. The annealing process, I'm going to do the whole thing because if someone's only worked in steel and doesn't know copper, then they may not have this information, but maybe everybody listening already knows this. But so annealing in copper and all non-ferrous metals, when you heat it up, all the crystal structures get misaligned and it's soft. as you hit it, they get realigned and it gets hard again. If you hit it too far, then it breaks, which is why you break a wire eventually if you keep bending it back and forth. This, sometimes I can pull this off and do the fold forming in the same go. This is already starting here. So this is fully work hardened. So I'm going to go back and anneal it again. But different metals will work harden faster, and brass work hardens real fast. Sterling is just a jerk. Fine silver is more closer to copper. So gold is super generous. So it's a question of knowing your material and getting familiar with how far you can take it. And I'm gonna anneal this little guy again.
Kest, is the weight of copper that you're using now, I mean, is that like a pretty good general size if folks are wanting to play around with this and practice and feel, what like work hardening feels like versus annealing? Is this a weight that you would recommend?
I like the .040, the 18 gauge. It has enough thickness that you can play with it. So like if you're working with something much thinner, when you go to forge it, when you go to raise a bowl or whatever it is that you're going to do, it's really easy to hit the whole way through. Whereas this has a little bit of give. If you're going to be doing heavy forging, if that's what you want to play with copper, I'd actually start thicker. I'd start with 16 or even 14. If you're going to be doing more cutting and, small scale, you're onto a pair of earrings or something, I would go thinner. But it's hard to forge anything much thinner than about 22 because you just hammer straight through. So even if you're doing something small and lightweight, I don't go any thinner than, it's probably about 20 gauge. But I do 20 gauge for the small, I don't think that they went by on the slideshow, but the little Baba Yaga houses are about 20 gauge. And if I'm doing like a teapot or something, then I'm going to start at 16 or 14 so that I have enough material to pull up the sides.
Yeah, so in the slideshow, I only showed the mask.
Yeah, which is what we're doing, so that makes sense. But yeah, I can, when we do the studio tour thing, I can show you some of the Baba Yaga houses. And they're just small sculptural pieces. So they don't have to be worn, so it doesn't matter how thin the edge is. But if you're doing earrings, they can also be much thinner, even though they are getting worn, because they're not against the skin. You should. But hopefully you're not getting earrings in your eyes. Let's just say that. So now I'm only annealing towards this edge here, but you'll see that I'm still doing a lot of this out here because, again, copper just robs heat. So even though I'm only heating here, it's annealed all the way back to there. And in fact, I don't actually want to quench this. So you stay here. I'll go grab one of the Baba Yaga houses.
And so, in my playings with copper and doing some repoussé with it and fold forming and all that, I usually use about 16 gauge down to like 14. So it's kind of a thicker, and you can really feel work hardening as you're using it. Copper is a very interesting metal, and those are adorable.
And so in this, you can actually see, because I was forging that edge and this is thinner, that cracked. And I didn't care about that crack because this is a sculptural piece that's going to sit there. But that's why I don't go much thinner. And yeah, if you're doing repoussé work, 16 is a good start. 14 if you're doing deep stuff. And these guys, they don't need to be thicker, so they're not. And I do, because copper is relatively expensive, you don't need to work thicker than you need to. but you do need to work as thick as you need to. This should be cold enough. So now what we're doing next here is a tiny bit of fold forming. This is how we get the noses. I want this to go down and then up. So he's going to have a little bit of an elephant curl. And I cut this angle in. So I'm going to use that as my point, as my reference point. Oh, I'm just spraying water at y'all, whatever, okay. So when you hit one side, it stretches it. If one side is longer than the other, it has to curl. It doesn't have any options. This is where things want to crack. So this is where you got to keep an eye on that annealed versus work hardened thing. I am hitting from both sides, but I'm only hitting from both sides for reasons of texture. It doesn't actually care. It is also true that I keep the edges of my anvil a lot sharper than would be standard for blacksmithing, so that I have a precise edge that I'm hitting here. But you don't have to. You just have to know what your tools look like. So my goal here is to curl that tip enough that when you're wearing it, you don't stab someone. I'm real big on not stabbing people with my masks. I may in fact have to anneal again to get there. Oh, no, there we go. So you can see now it's pointing back up again. So that's not gonna hurt anybody. What I'm doing here is just reflattening because it'll be easier on the next step. Fine. Generally speaking, I don't leave any straight lines anywhere because it just doesn't make them look alive. So what I'm doing here is not curling a lot. It's just enough so that we don't have a real straight line there. This side, when you're hitting the folded side, you don't have to be nearly as careful about cracking. It pretty much doesn't want to. It's when you're stretching the edges that it cracks.
Kest, at least, oh, that looks great. I like that little subtle curve for the bridge, and then it comes up in the nose.
Yeah.
So I've personally have a lot of like crossover between fold forming and my childhood love of origami. Billy O is asking that, like, have you taken origami classes? Are you like into origami with this kind of stuff, or?
So the first book that I ever stole from the library when I was a small child.
You won't tell, I promise.
It's not the first book I checked out, but it is the first one that I deliberately kept. Is a book of origami. There's not as much overlap as I want there to be. Like, I want it to be, like I can just make that paper crane out of this. The fact of the matter is that copper doesn't really want to be folded more than 2 thick. So I'm not going to do it on this, but I can fold this once more, and it actually produces a kind of like floral, it's really pretty. And fortunately, could you go down and grab the cuffs? Could you go down and grab the cuffs? And it produces a really pretty floral thing, but you can't really go more than 2 thick. It doesn't hold the crease anymore. So
yeah, so my own experiments with it is I've found like, oh, if you're gonna try to fold something and it's gonna be that more than 2 layers thick and part of it's hidden, I'll cut it out. So the starting shape is rarely a sheet of paper,
yeah,
like a weird cutout shape, so that it has these hollow spots. But it's fun to try to get metal to act like paper.
It is, and if you use like a 26 gauge or something really thin, you can do a lot of it. But then you have something that's not a whole lot stronger than paper. um, but it's a lot of fun. Okay, we're 1 second. Keep looking at that.
So I think maybe this is a good opportunity. I'm going to be closing this auction in the next handful of minutes. Oh, that's a beautiful fold formed shape.
So that's still only 1 thick, I think, but is much closer to the origami. This is what I'm actually, so that's 2 thick and then unfolded. So that was folded along this line, and then while it was folded along this line, did I get that right? No, it would have been folded along this line, sorry. Well, it was folded along this line. Before opening it, I folded it twice there, and then opened it, and then you get that effect. But do your auction. I'll stop.
So Lynn in the audience is saying they tried to make copper paper airplanes, and I've made a bunch out of steel, and they said it didn't work. And I know why it didn't work is because when you fold a paper airplane out of a rectangular shape, it becomes too thick. And so I'll start my airplane right from the beginning by cutting 45-degree angles from the tip, so it's not, 4 layers of thickness by the time you fold them up. It's just down to 2. Which Charlie's pointed out, there's an art called origami, which is you make the cuts to help get the shapes.
So this is actually my last anneal, which is where I meant to paint the thing on, and I forgot. So I'm going to keep that nose all the way up, and I'm going to flip this little guy over, and I'm going to keep the fire over here, and I'm going to do some stuff. So basically all this does is prevent an amount of oxygen. So it's going to be a slightly different color. Generally speaking, I do this while it's cold. But you can see I've burned this paintbrush before. If you're going to be burning paintbrushes, I recommend getting natural ones and not anything plastic. So this is giving him a sort of clown. He's going to be a little bit clowny because it's Halloween and I wanted to do a clown. It won't be super dramatic because we are doing it after, but it'll show up.
So, Kest, I know on your website you have a bunch of masks that are for sale as well as jewelry. Will this one make it up for purchase if somebody in the audience was wanting to buy this from you?
It will. If someone wants this one in specific, what I would recommend is if you're on Facebook, follow the Facebook page. If you're on Instagram, follow the Instagram page. If you're on neither of those, email me, Frederick Department of Art. That's not the official email. Wait, that's the one I give personal people. K@vagabondmetalworks.com. That's my email. And you can reserve it. They are all one of a kind. So if you want a specific one that you see me doing, it is best to go ahead and let me know that before it gets to the website.
And you said your email was K, the letter K, @vagabondmetalworks.com?
Yes. So I'm heating the whole way up to cherry red right now because, again, this isn't about annealing. This is about the color. Because I'm going to open this nose, and this little guy's going to be, this is his last heating. So I want him to get both sides even. I want to get the whole nose. Everybody gets heated the same. Otherwise, the colors won't be good. And if the colors aren't good, then I have to do more work. I do use a few patinas in the shop, but the only patinas I use are liver of sulfur, which is non-toxic. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a room full of it. It smells terrible. It doesn't do any harm. And sometimes I will use the bleach for ammonia. I do those outside because I am personally allergic to bleach. So it's not even about the birds for that one. That's about me. But they do the traditional like verdigris green kind of, I've been under the ocean forever kind of color. Liver sulfur just black. But I try to avoid having to use any of them and just use the fire. So again, I'm not going to quench this because I want the colors, and the cold water messes up the colors. The cold water tends to crack all the colors off. It makes the top layer flake. So if we let it cool, if we let it air cool, I'm actually going to put it on the anvil to cool because the anvil will rob it of some heat, but not in a shocking way. But I don't want to shock the colors off.
Do you use anything to seal your masks at the end once you're finished?
Yes. So they're going to get sealed with butcher's wax, which is a brand. It's a flooring wax. It's intended for bowling alleys, so it's very, it holds up well. But Johnson's paste wax will also work. People use mixtures of beeswax and like linseed oil. You can't use beeswax straight because it cracks, and these need to be flexible. So it has to be something that will flex. But there's a lot of options. I use the butcher's wax. I'm going to be honest, primarily just because I've always used the butcher's wax. And once you have something that works, why bother to mess with it? But pretty much, there's a lot of things that will work. The like a spray, like a Krylon or a clear coat of any kind, won't work for these because they need to be flexible. But if you're doing something in 14 gauge, you can just use a clear coat and it'll be fine because that's not going to move much anyway. That should be cool enough to quench. And now all I'm doing is I'm opening this up. What I open it up with is a screwdriver that has been very, very conscientiously polished. Taken, all the corners are taken down. I repolish this thing once a week or so. I don't want this to leave any marks. There are other people who we use a wood tool to open it. I have trouble getting into the tips with the wood one, or even like a plastic knife, but you don't want something that's going to mark it. That's the key. So even though it just looks like I'm using a screwdriver, do not use a screwdriver unless you've also treated it. I'm doing this against my hand. In all the years that I have done this, I have not found a surface that works better than just using your hand. You can try to use a beanbag, but it's hard to get the beanbag in the right places. It's easier to just balance it out with your hand. I have a smaller one. It is also treated. This one has a bit of an angle, and I tend to use that one for the last little bits of that nose. I'm going to clean up this opening later, so I'm not too worried about it being even, but I do want to make sure that it's open enough the whole way along. So leaving that little guy there. Next is going to be over here. For my next step here, I am using a stake. You don't need a stake. What you need is something that has more than a 90-degree angle, because this isn't going to open. It's going to end up being about maybe 40 degrees here. So you don't want to open it on the edge of your anvil because that opens it too far. I mean, you can kind of do and just not do the whole way in, but it's a lot easier to see how that comes to a point. And anything that comes to a point will do. So you can just take a piece of stock that you have handy and forge it into a flat. I'm calling it a point, but that's obviously not a point, but forge it into a flat that gets thin at the end and it'll be fine. You don't need the fancy thing. You do need some kind of tiny mallet. You can use a piece of Delrin that you have cut to a triangle. It doesn't have to be this exact shape, but it's got to be a mallet and it's got to be teeny because it's got to get in there. And all I'm doing is opening this up the rest of the way. At this point, you do want to try to keep it about even. So, and then I'm going to come in and kind of do this. So at this point, this is work hardened. So it's going to stay about where it is unless I try to do something, and just widening out basically the nostrils, if you can think of it that way. And you don't want to widen it too far. You think that it's going to be more comfortable, but the trick with these is that you want the weight distributed over a large area, which means you want it to touch most of the face, not all the face. And then at this point, you could easily do the next step on the edge of an anvil. All I'm doing is taking a line from this point right there to that point right there, and then from that point right there to the edge of the eye, down to here. If when you were drawing your pattern, if you extended this eye out, you want to remember where that point was, because it doesn't matter where the actual eye hole is, but it matters where, good point on my face, where that is.
Kest, that
Yes.
the little hammer you're using right now, what is on the nose of that? Is that like a plastic or?
It's plastic. I think it's nylon. It might be Delrin.
But it's just a softer surface, right? We're not marring.
It's a softer surface. A wood would also work. It's just that when you get to this small, it's hard to get wood that doesn't crack. But I also have a couple of like, you know, this kind of thing. This one has removable tips, which is why one of them is missing. So they come in lots of shapes, which is handy for me. This thing that we're doing today does not require a fancy shape, but some of the other things that I do. And this stake that I'm using happens to have a curve in here that's handy. Again, you can do all this flat on an anvil, except for that opening part that you want, the little thing that'll go in. So nothing requires this stake. If it's there, you can use it. And so I am doing both of these outs. So right now I'm being very careful on that because I don't want to break that. So it has to go with me as I go. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to take out, because this is where your actual nostrils go. And where your actual nostrils go, you need enough room, because otherwise it gives you the sniffles. And no one wants that. So you can see I'm actually pulling that out pretty far. And this is a little bit of back and forth, because when you hit one side, the other side moves. I'm just being careful of these eyes because they have that thin spot. You can absolutely use in copper the fact that one part work hardens. So you can hit along this edge here, like hard, and then you know it'll stay. And then you can play with the rest of the shape separately. I don't generally, because I like to have the option to switch things if it doesn't fit super well later. But that's a good starting point. So this isn't going to fit a face yet, but it is as much as we have to hammer it out, except that that's not even. And then from here, we're actually going to go to this spot. Nope. Yeah. So usually I have a chair here. I forgot a chair. This is just round nose pliers. I like to do a sharp, because again, this is largely where the actual weight of the mask is going to be resting. So I like to give it a pretty sharp line. I think my cameraman is doing some adjustments. You can see it, but see that point's just a little bit sharper now. And then with this can be done with a hammer over a dapping block, but it's just easier if you happen to have a pair of pliers that you have polished, which again, these are heavily polished. All I'm doing is just really subtly pulling that in around the eye. So that's that stretching that I did earlier in the first step. You don't want it to come in too far because it'll poke you, but you also don't want it flat. And so I'm actually, this point, I'm not going to pull in. And I'm not going to do as much on that other eye, the weird eye. But and you can see, I mean, I don't know if you can see on there, but you can see how I have it braced against my body because it will want to open as you do this. And I don't want it to open. I want it to stay where it was. So I have this hand here, and this is against my body, so it can't pull back. And that just gives it a little bit of life. So it looks a little bit more like a being and a little bit less like a computer. And I'm going to do a little bit of that on this eye, but much less because this eye has got a lot going on.
Well, we've just closed the auction, and thank you so much, Lynn Moore, for your generous donation. But anybody else who's in the group, if you are coming to these and you appreciate what the NWBA has been doing, hop over to blacksmith.org. We've got a donate button. And I would also recommend, if you think you've got room in your life for a mask, hop over to Kest's website and support them. There's no better way to show your appreciation for this demo than to go and purchase a mask.
I just realized that I forgot to put holes for the ribbon in.
Well, it's not too late, right?
It's not too late. We're going back to the anvil. Back to the anvil. This step is usually done at the very beginning. Whoops. Let's see if I even know where that tool is.
I was gonna ask, but I figured you had it all planned out. So.
Yeah, no, I completely forgot. So some of them get fancy hand cut ones if it needs it for the design. If it doesn't need it for the design, it gets chiseled. So that's a chisel. You guys know what chisels are. You're much more familiar with chisels than I am. This is just a big aluminum block that you can see I've been using for a long time. It's about time to refinish this one, but that's not something we're doing in this demo. So this, apparently I need to level that too. Whatever, it's fine. Generally goes in line with the eye. So, because it's going to want to be slightly above the ear. I will clean that up later. There we go. Back over. So at this point, we're fitting it. I have to take off my glasses for this, and so then I'm blind, which is great. Also, my mom cut my hair, so, you know. So because I've been doing it for a while, I have a pretty good sense of this. So it's pretty close when I start. But it always requires a bit of futzing. And so at this point, I'm trying to get it so it fits a general face, not my face particularly. And where we want it to rest is going to be right along this ridge here, and right up here. So if somebody has a wider nose, it'll be okay. If somebody has a wider face, it'll just open up. But we want it to have a base starting point. Um, they are pretty flexible. And you can see, like, I'm doing this with my thumbs. So this doesn't have to be done in the shop, but you want it to start off with some degree of being a face. And see, like, that's holding my eyebrow up, so that doesn't work. Um, when I say these things are comfortable, I mean them to be genuinely like something that you can wear and not remember that you have it on. In this case, because it has this line there, you're going to be able to see that, but it's very much like having the frame of a pair of sunglasses. You kind of forget it. And so I usually set them to roughly my nose width, but
there's
they're
an
easy to adjust.
for like the end user here, whoever purchases this mask, to be able to kind of do a little cold forming to get it to fit their face.
Exactly. And they are not work hardened when I sell them. So the only part of this that's hard is this line here, which I do that on purpose. So that was why that last heat matters, because I cannot heat it again after I open it. So this is hardened. So when someone's messing with it to get it to fit, this is going to stay. And then everything else is flexible so that they can make it fit the way that they want it to fit. They're not going to be able to change where the eyes are, which is why that was so important at the beginning in the preparatory step of drawing to get them in the right place. This line here, honestly, not super fond of, but that happens sometimes. So,
well, it looks great from this end.
yeah. Well, it's like anything. You notice the things that nobody else is going to notice. That's better, actually. So that's basically fit. And then I go along the edge and just clean it up just with pliers. Like don't make things harder than they have to be. And so that is, so basically this guy still needs to be seen. I can't see anything. Where are my glasses? Also, a lot of them, and I don't know if this will be one of them, but let's see. Yep. So this one, for my glasses, I'd need to make a notch. But a lot of them I can wear my glasses right with. It's super thin. It's super close to the face. This one, I'm going to need to do a little bit of scrubbing because I left a little bit of flux on here. It didn't all burn off. So I need to wash this one, sand it, and then it does get the wax, which we can walk over.
So I know that, with most of them you make, you're doing all that sanding before, and this one you kind of skipped out. But will you expect with this one you'll go back over and sand those outer edges before it hits the shelf?
Yes. So in fact, they actually get sanded twice generally. So that first sanding that we skipped because everyone was watching is largely for me, because when I'm handling them while I'm forging it, so like you saw how much it was on my hands. And frequently I'll actually be using my hand as a thing to hit against because I know how hard I can hit it. And so that first sanding is largely to keep my hands from getting cut during making. Even if I had done that full sanding beforehand, I would still be doing a full sanding now. And I like to get the eyes before I do it because it's harder to get in there, which is why that's the part that I did when I wasn't going to be doing the whole thing. It's harder to get in the eyes afterwards. But that whole thing with half the time making these is sanding. So like I'll be going back and I'll be sanding all those edges. I would have to resand this edge anyway because I made a new edge. And then particularly up in here, because that spot again is against the face. And actually I'm going to redo the eyes as well because I can feel them. And the goal is basically to not be able to feel it. Like I should be able to slide my hand along this edge without knowing that I'm sliding my hand along an edge. So there'll be a lot of sanding. This is the wax that I use. You were asking earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Butcher's got bought out a while ago. And when it did, I ordered like 20 cans. So I can't speak to how good it is now that it's under the new management. I'm sure it's fine. But I haven't used those. I'm still using the old ones. You just want something that will hold up. So flooring wax is better than furniture wax because flooring wax is made to hold up to more wear and tear. But definitely get the clear stuff. Johnson's comes in an amber. You don't want that. I made that mistake once. I didn't think to check. So it'll say clear on it, and paste wax. And again, lots of people make their own out of any number of different.
Yeah, all the different finishing concoctions. There's about a million.
Yeah.
Are you applying, when you apply that wax, do you do it cold? Do you do it warm?
So what I do is I open this can with something that is not here. I put it on. This is not the tool that I generally use. I use the paint can opener. I mean, it's not like it's a fancy tool, but there we go. You can see how much I use this. So what I will usually do is I put it on cold, and then I have this little heater in my bench tray for myself. There we go. And I'll put them in front of that so that it can soak in. But I don't generally actively heat them. So just rub it on. And then this isn't turning
on. Well, Kest, I just want you to know, you lots of positive feedback from the audience here. Lots of like fantastics, amazing, super cool. Didn't think that this would be done in 2 hours, and that is just amazing how quickly you were able to do one of these. Speaking from someone who's been to every single one we've had, you've done a great job presenting this.
Oh, good.
Excellent demonstration.
Yay! Yeah, so that's it. We're done.
Well, thank you so much. And if you don't mind, I'm going to hop back over to the slideshow so people can see it one last time while we're kind of closing things out. I don't know if you want to get yourself in a position where you can see the slideshow, if you have anything.
Oh, sure, yeah.
While you're doing it.
Oh, there, now the heater came on.
And, the cameraman's getting some kudos. Great job. Perfect demo. This was just one.
Yay! Thank you.
Going back to the slideshow, and thank you so much for sharing your shop with us. Oh, actually, hey, before I start the slideshow, do you want to give us a little shop tour?
Oh, sure, yeah. Here, let's. I'm doing a quick around. With maybe, can I just grab it off of the thing? You have to get it off the tripod. There we go. That's my cameraman's hand. You've met my cameraman's hand now. So there's not a whole lot of shop yet because I am just moving in. So this is my bench. And I keep things that I use a lot are to the right of it. So the saw blades that I've grabbed earlier are actually supposed to be in one of these, but there goes the tripod. But so the drill bits, burrs, that's where the saw blades go. That's my stone setting stuff. I don't do much stone setting, but it's there. And then the paste wax was there. And then stuff that I use often, but not quite that often, is under here. So that's all pliers and stuff. Over here we have power tools. So you see that I do in fact have a scroll saw. Currently it has a wood blade in it, but I just never use it. This, I use a wire wheel polisher, which you'll note this isn't, but moving is weird. Belt sander is not set up yet. And then over here we have some of the finished pieces. So this is actually one of my Baba Yaga houses who needs to be released, but this is Baba Yaga's city house. And this is a snake outfit for a chipmunk. I don't know, you can't see that. It's too reflective. Well, that's the thing I've learned. And then most of this is just, we've thrown things in more or less at random. Here's a hawk suit for a squirrel. Oh, I made this thing, it actually moves. Can you take the top off? Oops. See, this was my first automaton.
Oh, that is so
That's
cool.
the wings. Apparently it's hard to do with one hand. There we go. I'm meaning to make more of those, but I haven't. That's a merganser suit for a fish and a snake suit for a butterfly. Oh yeah, there's one of the Baba Yaga houses. So this is if Baba Yaga's house was a grouse instead of a chicken. Also it's, you know, a little smaller. There's a cuckoo outfit for a cicada. Again, it's in the glass. Today I've learned that I can't use this phone for things that are in glass, but there we go. So that's a little cicada wearing a little cuckoo suit so that he won't get eaten by cuckoos. Yeah, but yeah, mostly the parts of the shop that aren't in this room just don't exist yet. Oh, I hung some things on the wall. The empty hooks are the things that I took down to show y'all earlier. But there's that mask that you showed in the slideshow. So that's him. The ones that have the antlers are heavier because antlers weigh more than copper does. If it has weight to it, the weight rests on top of the head. So anything that's heavy, I actually have go back over the whole head, so it wears more like a helm and less like a mask, so you don't have weight on your nose. I honestly, I think that's about it. So we've got drill press, stakes, more stakes down there. I haven't put those ones up yet. Beverly shear, rolling mill, stumps for hitting in. Yeah, that's about it. So yeah, slideshow.
Well, thank you so much for the tour. And I gotta say, I never thought that I would see like a cicada outfit. I just love the whimsy and imagination you've got on that shelf over there. That's so wonderful.
Yeah, I started the cicadas, the bug outfits, etc. I actually started doing events with the alternative taxidermy crowd. Oh, the woodpeckers are up. Yes. My cameraman points out that I should show you the woodpeckers.
Hold on, let me
Not
come
too
back.
late.
I was
Sorry. Yep. So these are, oh, can we focus it? No, it doesn't focus. I don't know how to focus this. I'm going to give this to the camera person. These are little ivory build out woodpecker outfits for beetles. Yeah, I can't get it to focus. Well, that's not going to work. Go back to the slideshow. You can't see this anyway.
Okay. But I guess I am just in love with all these outfits for bugs to keep them from being eaten. I just love that.
Yeah. So I started doing stuff with the alternative taxidermy crowd, and they're incredibly sweet. It turns out they're the sweetest people I've ever met. And so it's the Predator Mask for Prey series, and so each one moves everybody up one step. The reason that it's mostly bugs is because I can't actually do taxidermy on mammals. I'm too sensitive. So they're mostly, for them, I mostly do the bugs. But that's why the little chipmunk suit is actually on a little wax chipmunk and stuff like that. Because I don't know. I'll get there, but I'm not there yet.
Well, I've got the slideshow up. I'm going to run this one backwards, starting from the end, coming forwards. I don't know if you can get yourself on a screen. If there's any ones you want to talk about, you don't need to.
Okay. Yep, I can see. So that's where the wild things are. That's Max's little ship. It's a crown. And that's another one out of the fairy tale series. So that's my little tinker. So that's all hand cut. Which is where the jeweler saw really. comes
right? You're just getting in and
Mhm.
removing.
Yep. Yeah, so that's the same way we made the nose today for those horns. That's everything is one piece. So, um, and that's one of the plain ones. So that's the base pattern that's under a lot of stuff. A lot of the other, like even the pattern that we worked with today is actually drawn off of this pattern. That's the same 5 points that we were talking about. Uh, and it's easier to have a couple of bases that you work from. So that's another one of the longhorn ones. Um, in that case, that little bit on the nose would have been two separate pieces, not two separate pieces, would have been cut out of the same thing, from the negative space around that nose and then forged upwards to give it its little, I don't know, are they nostrils, beak, whatever it is. I like that one though. And that one, the color around the eyes is also from the forge. This one, the color is actually not from the flux at all. That color is from sandwiching it with another piece that was the shape of the black lines, and heating it sandwiched really close with another piece so the oxygen can't get in there. I do the same thing for earrings a lot.
Yeah, that's a great example of the control of fire patina that you can develop.
Yeah. Oh, that's my little piggy. I like him. He's cute. Oh, that's another one of the fairy tales. That's Peter and the Wolf, I think. So I was doing the fairy tales. That's a little curly guy. I was doing the fairy tales almost exclusively for a while because I had broken a small bone in one of my hands, and I could do the sawing without exasperating the problem, but I couldn't do a lot of heavy hammering. I like this one. This one's a really good example of the fold forming. It's just without being big. It's a little mask, but it has all the same stuff that goes into the big mask.
Yeah, and all the control you can get with bending and folding by just fulling an edge.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and the key with oh yeah,
So much
that
movement.
one is that one actually has a video on it. Harry Stagmeyer of, oh gosh, I just forgot the name of his show. No. Anyway, during the beginning of the pandemic was having people send in videos of them working in their shop. And so I have a video on his channel of the making of that one. Um, no, is it? Maybe it's not. Oh, I'm not gonna. Well, I gotta have to give you that link later.
That's okay.
This one was really hard. This is also all from one piece, and it's folded down into two layers, and getting those layers to line up properly to get the eyes in the right spot was worthwhile once.
Yeah, and especially a lot of brass where it's a little more stubborn, wants to fight you.
Yeah, brass is a jerk. Um, Brass is fun to work with because I can do a lot more of the big cutouts. So you see how big the eyes are on that one. And it's really strong, so it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have as much metal for it to be there. But it's a jerk to work with. It wants to crack. It doesn't want to bend.
Yeah. Is
Yeah. Mhm.
stainless silver?
So this is, and I do these sometimes. People all wanted silver masks for so long, and working in silver is incredibly expensive because of the scale that I'm working at. So that would be in sterling, that would be like $500 just for the materials. And so finally, I figured out that I could work in things that had already been silver plated. So that's actually an old plate. That's an old platter. I think that one's silver plate over brass, if I remember, but I'd have to check the records. And the engraving that's in the middle is in fact someone's old wedding engraving. Um, and the edges are from that plate. So all I did there was forge the metal. I didn't do any of that. I mean, I cut out the mask, obviously. But all of that fancy filigree work is endemic to the plate.
Whoa, that's really cool.
So this is one of my Krampus masks. Those horns are natural horn because natural horn is super light and it is a byproduct of meat industry. So those critters were going to die anyway. I didn't kill them. Um, and it's just really light and easy to work with. It's much easier than the antlers
Yeah.
because they're hollow, so I can just rivet them on and they're done. I use pop rivets. It's great. So you can actually see the cutouts that are near the horns are then folded up and are what is holding the horn in place.
Oh, that's ingenious. And I
Yeah.
meant to ask earlier, so the ribbons that you're using to tie these, like what kind of materials are you using for your?
The ribbon is usually just gross grain. It's whatever's handy. They get replaced later by the wearer, and almost inevitably, anything will work. I don't like elastic because it stretches, and so it also stretches the other way. I mean, you really do want them to be as tight as you can get them. So I usually just use whatever, like a gross grain ribbon, a satin ribbon, whatever looks good with the piece. This is Ghost. Ghost is very old. Ghost is almost 20 now. Um, and Ghost was when I first graduated from college, and I was friends with a bunch of people on Flickr because this is, the olden days. And one of them challenged another one. They were jewelers. They were all jewelers. One of them challenged the other one to make a skull ring, and long story, but somehow I ended up with Ghost because I decided that if I was going to get double dared to do something, then I was going all in. Um, yeah.
This one's really cool. So I'm assuming that this is not all one piece. This is multiple.
No, so this is a unique example of more than one piece. So there's the copper is two pieces. The ocular ridge is raised out. So it's just two pieces on the top. The lower jaw is a separate piece, and then that inner mask that you can see right around her eyes that's supporting the weight of it is a fourth piece. So it's four pieces.
Oh, this one's super cool.
Oh yeah, and that one is all one piece. See, that's an example of me getting better over time. So this one's more recent, and that is all one piece of copper.
You
All
fold
the
ears down from the top, and then the front, you folded the eyes up into the ears.
Yep.
That's so cool. The filigree.
That one. I'm sorry. That one. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I wish that the picture was clearer that I poached from you. Is that found art that you have in the eyes, or did you cut all that out?
Yeah. So the ones that have the eye patches like that, it is old stampings. A friend of mine for a long time was living in one of these old mill buildings in, I think it was Providence, Rhode Island. And a stamping company moved out and left a bunch of stuff behind. And I ended up with a bunch of these stampings. And again, you can actually see through that, which is kind of nifty. So it's like wearing mirrored sunglasses. So you can be looking at somebody and they don't know where you're looking. Soldering those on is a challenge because they're made out of various different materials. So some of them are made out of brass, and those ones I can just solder on and be done. This one was some kind of alloy. I never even figured out exactly what it was. And so you can actually see that it's sewn on with little brass wires around the edges. It's hard to see in the picture, but trust me, it's there.
So difficult to try to solder unknown materials.
Yeah. This one has little glass eyes from doll making, and they're set just traditional cab setting. So they're just little glass eyes. They are 8 millimeters, and they're set in little 8 millimeter bezel cups. And so I solder the bezel cup on and then just set them as though they were stones. They have to be set really securely because glass can scratch that same thing. So that's actually set the way that you would set a prong setting. It's just a traditional prong setting. With these ones, because they were so big, I did also use a cement on the back so that they wouldn't rotate because, again, glass can scratch. And I don't want the setting to scratch the piece. And that's the one that I showed you earlier. So those are real antlers. And it is a little bit heavier, which is why you can't actually see it from the picture, but it goes the whole way over the back of the head. So it's actually resting behind the ears.
So this one, I think, is a great example of fold forming, where you can get these ridges from folding and then unfolding.
Yep. And the little bit of the curl was done while it was folded. One like that is actually more challenging than it looks like it would be, because I have to do each one separately because they're too close together.
Mm-hmm.
That same thing, if those ridges were farther apart, could be done in one heating and would be pretty easy. But as it was, that had to be folded, forged, unfolded, and then the next fold, folded, forged, unfolded, and then the next one. So it takes a bit longer. And that's another one of the little fairy tales. Was your rat was named Harold?
Harold, yeah, he's my little buddy. So.
Nice. Mine was named Baldwin. He was a good mouse. I liked him. That is, again, all made from one piece. That one is based on a Red River hog, which is a real animal. They're tiny little pigs. I shouldn't say tiny. They're relatively small pigs, wild pigs. And they have these ears. They have giant ears that have giant tassels on them so that they can knock the flies off their body. But like literally their ears are as long as their entire body. It is the cutest thing ever. I love them.
What kind of pig is it?
It's called a Red River hog, and I highly recommend doing an image search and looking them up. They're so cute.
As soon as we're done here, I'm looking it right up.
Yeah. That is one where that's actually a relatively recent one. I was experimenting with ears and getting them to pull forward. I feel like it was successful. Mm-hmm. And that's also my mammal nose. So that's another one of the Krampus. So that one's actually sheep horns. And again, they're real horns. They're light. They're strong. They don't break. That one has a good mustache. Oh, that one's little baby Cthulhu. I love him. That's, again, more of the fold forming.
I really like the baby Cthulhu. That's fun.
Yeah. And that's one of my bats. Also, that's my that's Columbina. That's one of my doves. They do live in the shop. That is when I'm talking about not using any chemicals in the shop. I mean, obviously water's a chemical, but you know, anything carcinogenic. That's one of the reasons. I have two of them. They're my friends. They live here. I really like that nose. I'm fond of that nose. I should do more of that nose.
Yeah, it's got so much movement and life to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of the slideshow. Thank you so much for everything, Kest. We really appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you.
And yeah, look forward to the next time maybe we get to come visit you. So
sweet.
Happy Halloween to you and everyone left. And I hope you all have wonderful, safe days. And you're just getting, you know, everybody's just been so stoked. You have lots of like awesome jobs, and thank you so much. Have everyone have a very safe and wonderful Halloween. We'll see you next time.
Yay. Thanks for coming to the shop. Bye.
Bye.